Right, let's get one thing straight. For decades, the choice has been simple. You either filled your car with the stuff that comes from dinosaurs, otherwise known as petrol, or you opted for the oily, smelly tractor-fueling alternative diesel. It was a straightforward battle. The red pump or the black pump. The quick one or the slow, rattly one. But then, along came this other thing, this LPG. It stands for Liquefied Petroleum Gas, which sounds terribly scientific and complicated, doesn't it? It sounds like something you'd use to launch a rocket, not to potter down to the shops for a pint of milk and a copy of the Daily Mail. But that's precisely what some people are doing. It's an alternative, a third way. So what is this mysterious gas? Well, it's mostly a mix of propane and butane. Yes, the same stuff you use for your barbecue or your camping stove. Someone, somewhere, had the brilliant idea of stuffing it into a car's fuel tank. It's a byproduct of refining crude oil and extracting natural gas, so it's not exactly conjured from thin air by wizards. The main difference, then, is what you're putting in the tank. Instead of a liquid that sloshes about, you're pumping in a gas that's been squashed under pressure until it becomes a liquid. This means you need a special tank, usually a donut-shaped one that sits in your spare wheel well, making your spare wheel a rather inconvenient passenger in your boot. Unlike petrol or diesel, which are universally available at every single fuel station from Land's End to John O'Groats, LPG is a bit more exclusive. You have to hunt for it. You might find a station that sells it, looking all smug with its special pump, but then drive for another 100 miles and find nothing. It's like trying to find a decent cup of tea in France. Possible, but it requires planning and a certain amount of desperation. This is because most LPG cars aren't born that way. They are typically standard petrol cars that have been converted. This gives them two fuel tanks, a bi-fuel system, which means you can run on petrol when you inevitably run out of the gas. This conversion process is key. You can't just pop down to Halfords and buy a kit. Well, you probably could, but your car would likely explode. It involves fitting that special tank, along with a separate set of fuel lines, injectors, and a vaporizer. This bit of kit turns the liquid gas back into a vapor before it goes into the engine to be ignited. It's a clever system, but it's an addition, an aftermarket modification. It's like buying a perfectly good suit and then asking a bloke down the pub to sew on some extra pockets. It might be practical, but it does alter the original design, and not always for the better. Let's talk about the thing that really matters: money. The main and frankly only reason most people bother with LPG is because it's cheap. Gloriously, wonderfully cheap. You pull up to the pump, fill the tank, and when the cashier tells you the total, you don't have a heart attack. As of today, in late 2025, you're looking at paying roughly half the price per liter for LPG compared to petrol. That is a colossal saving. If you do a lot of miles, say, as a traveling salesman of novelty garden gnomes, the pennies you save will quickly turn into many, many pounds. The government likes it, so they don't tax it as heavily. For now. However, there's a catch. Of course there is. An LPG car is less efficient. You'll use more liters of LPG to cover the same distance you would on petrol. About 15 to 20% more, to be precise. So while the price per liter is half, your actual saving isn't quite that spectacular. It's still significant, mind you, but you need to do the sums. Then there's the cost of the conversion itself, which can set you back a couple of £1,000. You have to drive thousands of miles just to break even before you start actually saving any money. It's a long-term investment, not a get-rich-quick scheme. Then there's the environmental argument. The Green Lobby will tell you that LPG is the fuel of angels. It produces significantly less carbon dioxide than petrol, and far fewer nasty particulates and nitrogen oxides than diesel. So, in theory, the air in our cities would be cleaner if we all drove LPG cars. You could breathe deeply without your lungs turning black. This is why it often gets a pass in urban low-emission zones, saving you yet more money. It's the closest you can get to driving a fluffy cloud, emissions-wise, without having to plug your car into a wall like some sort of giant toaster. But does all this saving and planet-hugging come at the cost of performance? The simple answer is yes. There is a slight drop in power when you're running on gas, maybe around 5 to 10%. On the motorway, you probably won't notice it. But if you're trying to execute a swift overtake on a B road to get past a dithering caravan, you might find the car is just a little bit more sluggish. It's like asking an athlete to run a race after having 1 pint of beer instead of none. They can still run, but that sharp competitive edge is slightly blunted. For most daily driving, it's a compromise you can easily live with. Now, what about keeping the thing on the road? Does adding a second, more complex fuel system turn your car into a maintenance nightmare? Not exactly, but it does add a few things to your to-do list. The LPG system needs its own checkup, usually every year or every 10,000 miles. This involves inspecting the tank, checking the hoses for leaks, and replacing a couple of special filters. You can't just take it to any old garage either. You need a specialist, a certified LPG whisperer who knows what they're doing. It's an extra cost and an extra hassle to factor into your annual budget. Safety is a big concern for many. People get nervous about driving around with what is essentially a bomb in their boot. The idea of a pressurized tank of flammable gas just a few feet from your backside is, admittedly, a bit unsettling. However, the reality is that modern LPG tanks are ridiculously tough. They are made of solid steel and are subject to incredibly strict safety standards. They are actually far more resistant to impact and fire than a standard, flimsy petrol tank. In a crash, the petrol tank is more likely to rupture and spill flammable liquid everywhere than the LPG tank is to fail. So what does it feel like to drive? Well, for 99% of the time, it feels exactly the same as a petrol car. You get in, you turn the key, and the engine starts. Most systems are set up to start on petrol, and then, once the engine is warm enough, they switch over to LPG automatically. There's a quiet little click from a solenoid valve, and that's it. You're now running on gas. There's a little switch on the dashboard that lets you choose which fuel to use, so you can flip back to petrol whenever you fancy, or more likely, when you can't find an LPG station. The driving experience is defined more by this dual fuel capability than anything else. It gives you an immense total range. With a full tank of petrol and a full tank of LPG, you could probably drive from London to the Scottish Highlands and back without stopping for fuel. It's a fantastic feeling of freedom. The diesel driver might get good economy, but he's still tied to the pump. The petrol driver has the performance, but is always watching the fuel gauge. The LPG driver has the best of both worlds, cruising along on cheap gas with a full petrol tank in reserve just in case. So, let's lay out the good and the bad. The big pro, the headline act, is the cost. It's significantly cheaper to run an LPG car, mile for mile. You save a packet at the pump, and that is a very alluring prospect. It's also better for air quality, which is nice if you have a conscience. And the extended range you get from having two fuel tanks is genuinely useful. It's a practical, sensible choice for someone who covers a lot of distance and wants to keep their motoring costs down without resorting to the misery of a small, underpowered diesel hatchback. On the other hand, the cons are not insignificant. There's the upfront cost of the conversion, which is a big hurdle. You also lose a bit of boot space to the tank, which is annoying. The reduced availability of LPG fuel stations is a genuine pain in the neck, requiring you to plan your long journeys like a military operation. Then there's the slight drop in performance and the extra layer of maintenance to worry about. It's not a fit-and-forget solution. It requires a bit of commitment from the owner. And crucially, you have to find a car worth converting in the first place. This brings us to the pros and cons list. Pros: much lower fuel costs, reduced CO2 and NOx emissions, extended driving range, and a quieter engine than a diesel. Cons: high initial conversion cost, reduced boot space, limited fuel station availability, slightly lower power output, and the need for specialist servicing. It's a balanced argument. For a city dweller doing short trips, it makes no sense at all. For a sales rep who lives on the M6, it makes all the sense in the world. It's a tool for a specific job. In conclusion, an LPG car is a compromise. It's a petrol car that's been to night school to learn how to be more frugal. It's not as straightforward as a petrol or diesel, and it demands more from its owner. But in return, it offers the tantalizing promise of massively reduced running costs. It sits in a strange middle ground, cleaner than diesel, cheaper to run than petrol, but more hassle than both. It's the thinking person's choice for saving money on fuel, assuming that person enjoys planning their routes around obscure filling stations. Is it better? No. Is it worse? No. It's just different. And in a world of automotive conformity, that is no bad thing.